This is Porky's on Atari 2600, based on the comedy film from the early 80s. It was one of the early examples of naughty comedies geared towards adults, and belongs in the same family of movies like Animal House and Caddyshack. Although not as classic and memorable as those, it has its place, and all of today's dumb comedies owe themselves to it. And likewise, all today's weird, twisted, up video games owe themselves to this. You want to play? This is your grandfather's. What happened? Only on Atari. It's never a good sign when you don't know how to play the game. I've fallen into a trap. The walls are dead ends and the water is pure death. To get out of this predicament, you have to use this pole to fling yourself up onto the platforms. But that's not all. You need to collect these blinking things to build the ladders. Get up there! For a game console that has only one button, the controls are very specific. While holding the button down, you run into the pole and then quickly release the button and tap it. If that tap is off in the slightest, you'll just swing to the other side of the pond. But if you do it at the exact microsecond, it will fling you up onto the platform. Alright, now let's build the ladder. It only adds one link at a time. So you have to wait for another blinky thing to appear and keep repeating the whole process until the ladders are finished. There's no way around it. You have to master this pole. This isn't even the goal of the game. This is just to get out of the trap. Now up the ladder, and there's a girl taking a shower. There is a scene in the movie where the guys are spying on the locker room shower, but I did not expect them to include this scene in the game. Why is she showering in a room full of ladders anyway? The shower itself is suspended in midair. As soon as she's in your field of sight, she disappears and a ghostly figure starts chasing you. Get away! I'm sorry, I'm not a sleazy sexual predator, I'm just a guy trying to escape the pond that's underneath your shower room. These are some of the most awkward ladders in video game history. In most games, you go in front of the ladder, but here you have to be on the side, and if you're not in the pixel-perfect spot, it doesn't work. So this strange woman is chasing you everywhere. She glides through the air with such power that it causes the game to glitch, as if sending a ripple through space and time. What do I do with this thing? I tried dropping it on her head, doesn't work. Tried going up, doesn't work. I tried going down. Really doesn't work. And if she catches you, it's back to the pond. Believe it or not, this whole predicament in the locker room closely follows the movie. The woman who's after you is the coach, Miss Ballbricker, who finds one of the boys putting his through a peephole in the shower. You'd think a scene like this would get ignored in a video game, but this is Atari, and sure enough, the manual says she's out to grab onto anything she can, so don't let her latch onto you. Yeah. The character you're playing as is Pee-wee, not Pee-wee Herman, but Pee-wee from Porky's, which doesn't make sense anyway because Pee-wee's not the character who gets his grabbed. Not Pee-wee Herman, he can grab his own but what are we talking about here? I'll cut the Here's what you do. Drop the items down the hole, the arrow appears, you go up the ladder to street level where you play some sort of game of Frogger on acid. What the hell are these things? If you get hit by anything, it's, you guessed it, back to the pond. If you make it across the street, it's another round of Shower Girl Defender Ms. Ballbricker. Each time it's a new item, but the process is exactly the same. All these items are part of a master plan to blow up Porky's bar. I didn't think it had a rhyme or a reason, but it does. It just so happens you have to trek through a woman's locker room, that's all. After you've gotten all the items, you progress to the worst part, the mother of all nightmares. Here you have to climb up the scaffolding while avoiding Porky. Yeah, now we have Porky too. Not Porky the pig, but Porky from Porky's. The scaffolding can only be climbed in certain places. It's basically like an invisible maze. One wrong move and you could fall all the way down where Porky will most certainly get you almost every time. When you make it back to try again, the maze reroutes itself, so it's always different. But as your reward, when you make it to the top, you get to blow up the bar. What an experience Pee-wee had. Can you imagine the story he has to tell? I was walking down the street, narrowly avoiding a speedboat, a submarine on wheels, a parade of naked Dr. Seuss characters, rabid pigs, dudes, and cars. I fell down into a pond where I swung around on a pole and built a ladder up into a girl's locker room shower where this weird blobby ghost tried to grab my I dropped a bunch of pyro equipment down the same hole that leads to the pond, but somehow ended up on top of a bunch of scaffolding where I went up and finished it all off with a boom! And that's why you gotta love Atari. Looks like we're in for a treat today. The Hyperscan by Mattel, the same company that made the Intellivision and the Power Glove. They also made every toy from He-Man to Barbie. LJN made toys. Let's see how this piece of holds up. It was released in 2006. It's hard to believe a specimen like this would exist at a time when Xbox 360, PS3, and Wii were the current gaming consoles. Nobody ever talked about this one. Let's find out why. The instructions are blinking. That's annoying. Player 1, scan your character card. You have to scan cards to make the game go? Having a disc isn't enough? How about a character select screen? That would have been fine. Scan. Scan, you Scan a mod card now? What's with all these cards? Just start the game. The cards were sold separately, so the idea was to combine card collecting with video gaming. Yeah, how about Pogs too? The fact that you always need to be scanning cards means you have to keep the game console on your lap, calling back to the Atari 2600 days where all the switches were on the console. It's still loading. Hyperscan. Yeah, it's really hyper. After a long load process that's only rivaled by the Commodore 64, the game finally starts. Well, it's a fighting game, a very average one. Average for the early 90s, but this is much later. At least you can say it's better than Shaq Fu. End it. I guess you're supposed to do some kind of finishing move. If only I had the card. I guess finish him is already taken, so let's call it end it. Then you wait through another load screen just to see the character stats. Then it's another load screen just to select the character. And then yet another load screen before the next fight starts.
Are you a fan of heavy metal?
3 load screens between matches. Next up, let's try Marvel Heroes. You can already tell that the Hyperscan was all about Marvel. Here you can apparently take control of Avenger characters as well as X-Men, depending on which cards you own. It's a standard side-scrolling action game. The graphics and sound are fair enough, but the control is kinda slippery, like you're running on grease. The attacking is delayed and the hit detection is terrible. Ah! Come on! Hit him! Hit him! I also find it hilarious that if you hang on to the side of a building, everybody jumps at you like dogs after a cat in a tree. There were much better games of this variety on Sega Genesis. Nothing to see here, folks. Then there's Interstellar Wrestling League. It's strangely quieter than the other games. I've never encountered that issue before, where the games have inconsistent volume. Even the scanning is inconsistent. This time it seems like I have to hold the card in place instead of swiping it.
Round 1, wrestle!
my face!
Here we have a humorous fighting game with controls way more awkward than X-Men. It sort of reminds me of Clay Fighter with its comedic elements, but instead of being charming, it comes off as just plain weird.
I like pie. I like to have pie every day.
Besides, why are they calling it wrestling when they're not even wrestling? And yes, he just turned into a cheeseburger. At last, we have Ben 10 based on the TV series. It's another side-scroller. You take control of Ben, and using the different cards, you can transform into different alien creatures. By the way, what's that, a Nintendo Wii? I like the concept. The graphics and character animations are great. This game could have been good. Almost awesome, but half the time you're not even playing the game. You're just wading through text boxes. Use the jump button to jump over the rock? This game treats you like an idiot. You can't do anything. Every step you take, the game pauses and another text box comes up. It's like Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, but multiplied 1,000 times. It's like they took the most annoying part of one game and made it the whole game 20 years later. This game is so recent, it came out after I already critiqued Simon's Quest. Couldn't anybody learn? I was already 11 episodes in by the time this hit the market in October 2006. The text boxes can freeze you in mid-air as you're trying to jump over a hole. When it unfreezes, you lose your momentum and fall to your death. I'm trying to jump! Leave me alone! Let me play the game! I can't read it anyway because they somehow put the text on the background layer. How did somebody let this get so up? These text boxes are your worst enemy and unholiest of gaming nightmares. You know, I played almost the entire library for it. There's also a Spider-Man game that I don't own, but that's 5 games. They made 5 games total for this piece of garbage. That's less games than the Virtual Boy. Well, at least it's not as bad as the R-Zone. Hyperscan. Hyper